Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's scream tore through the sterile air of the medical bay like a banshee's wail. The sound wasn't just panic, it was pure terror, mixed with something far worse. The crushing weight of knowing your entire life had just ended in the span of 3 heartbeats. Frost erupted from her fingertips like living lightning, racing across the examination table's surface with hungry determination. The metal groaned under the sudden temperature change, warping and cracking as ice crystals climbed the walls like frozen spiders spinning their deadly web. Dr. Patterson, the military physician who'd been checking her vitals just moments before, stumbled backward so fast his tablet flew from his hands, clattering across the floor like dice in a cosmic game she was losing. "Stay back!" Sarah's voice cracked with desperation, each word forming deadly clouds that sparkled in the harsh fluorescent light. Her breath had become a weapon, and she couldn't even control that anymore. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since the alien artifact exploded on Mars during what should have been a routine excavation mission. 3 weeks since her team had been vaporized in an instant, leaving her as the sole survivor of humanity's first contact with something beyond their understanding. 3 weeks since everything she touched turned to ice. The irony wasn't lost on her. Sarah had always been known for her warm personality. The soldier who remembered everyone's birthday, who sent care packages to her squad's families back home. Now she was a walking winter, a human blizzard trapped in flesh that should have been dead but somehow refused to stop breathing. "Dr. James?" Crawford stood safely behind reinforced glass, designed to contain biological weapons, his weathered face pressed against the viewport as he watched her vitals spike on his monitors. The man had seen everything in his 30-year career: soldiers torn apart by plasma rifles, victims of alien parasites, Marines who'd been exposed to radiation that should have killed them instantly. But this was different. Heart rates off the charts, he muttered to his assistant, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd just witnessed the impossible. Body temperatures dropping to levels that should kill her. "But look at these readings." He tapped the screen with increasing urgency. "Her cellular activity is actually increasing. Whatever's happening to her, it's not killing her, it's changing her." But Sarah was very much alive, and that was the problem. She was alive, aware, and absolutely terrified of what she was becoming. Every breath sent shivers of ice across the room's surfaces. Every heartbeat seemed to pulse with cold energy that made the air self-crystallize around her. You know what's funny about becoming a living weapon? Nobody asks if you wanted the job. One moment you're Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, decorated soldier and devoted daughter who called her mom every Sunday. The next moment you're patient zero in humanity's newest nightmare. Watching grown men in hazmat suits debate whether you're worth keeping alive, the containment alarm suddenly blared through the facility like the screams of a dying machine. Red. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in blood-colored shadows as Colonel Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the speakers with military precision. "All personnel evacuate level 7 immediately. The asset is unstable and poses immediate threat to facility integrity." Asset, that's what she'd become. Not Sarah, not Lieutenant Mitchell, not even a person anymore. Just an asset that had malfunctioned and needed to be contained or disposed of. Sarah pressed her face against the viewport, feeling the cold glass fog instantly under her breath. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they froze before they could fall, creating tiny ice sculptures of her despair. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. "I just wanted to serve my country, maybe make it home for Christmas." Behind her, the medical equipment had transformed into something from a twisted artist's imagination, a sculpture of ice and twisted metal that looked like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast. The heart monitor's beeping had become erratic, then stopped entirely as frost consumed its circuits. The fourth stand had become a frozen tree, its plastic bags now brittle ornaments that would shatter at the slightest touch. Through the reinforced glass she watched Dr. Crawford frantically making notes on his tablet, his face grim with the kind of expression doctors wore when they were about to deliver the worst possible news. His assistant, a young woman named Kelly, kept glancing between the monitors and Sarah with barely concealed horror. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow to the chest. She was no longer Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, decorated soldier and proud. American. She was no longer the woman who dreamed of returning home to her small town in Ohio, maybe opening that bakery she'd always talked about. She was no longer even entirely human. She was a weapon they couldn't control, force of nature, wearing a familiar face. And everyone in this room knew it. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom sometimes. That's exactly where you need to be to start climbing towards something extraordinary. It's because while Sarah Mitchell, the soldier, might have died on Mars, something else was being born in this sterile medical bay. Something that would either save humanity or destroy it. The question was, which would she choose? As the facility's emergency systems engaged and blast doors began sealing around her containment unit, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, at her heart that was still beating its frantic rhythm, something deeper, colder, more fundamental. The ice wasn't just spreading from her anymore, it was becoming her. And for the first time since the Mars incident, she wasn't entirely sure that was a bad thing. What happens when the very power that makes you dangerous becomes the key to saving everyone you love? Sometimes the greatest stories aren't about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, they're about extraordinary people learning to be human again. If you're ready to discover how small changes can create massive transformations over time, check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding. Trust me, you'll never look at growth the same way again. 2 months later, Sarah crouched like a predator in the shadows of the abandoned mining facility on Titan, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the methane-rich atmosphere that would have killed any normal human in seconds. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't normal anymore, hadn't been since that cursed day on Mars when her entire world turned upside down and inside out. The ice no longer felt cold to her. It felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile, like slipping into a warm bath after walking through a blizzard. The frozen metal walls of the facility hummed with familiar energy, responding to her presence like old friends welcoming her back. She'd learned to read the ice, to understand its language, to make it her ally in a universe that had declared her its enemy. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd found peace in the coldest, most inhospitable place in the solar system, Titan's largest moon, where the lakes were liquid methane and the snow was made of frozen hydrocarbons. A place where corporate mining operations had been abandoned after the cost of maintaining human life became too expensive. Perfect for someone who no longer counted as human in the eyes of the law. Heavy footsteps echoed through the tunnels like the heartbeat of some mechanical beast, each metallic clang sending vibrations through the frozen ground beneath her feet. The corporate security forces had found her again. Sarah's enhanced senses picked up the distinctive whine of plasma rifles charging, the nervous breathing of men who knew they were hunting something that could kill them with a touch. 8 signatures. She'd been tracking them for the past hour, watching their heat signatures move through the facility like glowing ghosts on her thermal vision. They thought they were hunting her, but the truth was far more terrifying. She'd been hunting them. Mitchell, Captain Ryan Brooks's voice boomed. Through his helmet speakers, the sound amplified and distorted by the methane atmosphere. Surrender now, and we'll make it quick. Sarah laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to freeze helium. Like you made it quick for the others? Her voice carried through the tunnels with an edge sharp enough to cut steel. She'd seen the reports, watched the classified footage that corporate thought they'd buried deep enough to stay hidden. 12 other survivors of the Mars incident, all hunted down and eliminated like rabid animals. You know what's really funny about corporate efficiency? They're great at covering up their mistakes until someone who can't be killed starts asking uncomfortable questions. She'd been that uncomfortable question for 2 months now. A walking reminder of corporate's failed experiment with alien technology. They'd found the artifact first, tried to weaponize it, turn it into the ultimate soldier enhancement. Instead, they'd created something they couldn't control, couldn't contain, and definitely couldn't explain to their shareholders. You're a monster, Mitchell, Brooks snarled, and Sarah could hear the fear beneath his bravado. His plasma rifle whined as it reached full charge, the sound echoing off the frozen walls like a death knell. Got you killed 30 civilians on Europa. The accusation hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment the ice around her cracked with the force of her emotions. They attacked me first. Sarah's voice cracked with fury and pain that had been building for months. She pressed her palm against the tunnel wall, and ice raced along the surface, like lightning made solid, spreading faster than thought, faster than fear. The memory of Europa flashed through her mind, the mining colony where she'd sought refuge, where the locals had welcomed her until corporate bounty hunters spread the word about what she was. The mob that had formed, armed with mining equipment and righteous anger, determined to claim the billion-credit reward on her head. She'd tried. Run tried to hide, but they'd cornered her in the colony's main habitat. I never wanted to hurt anyone. The words tore from her throat like broken glass. I just wanted to go home. But home didn't exist anymore. Home was a place where Sarah Mitchell had lived, and that woman had died on Mars along with her entire team. What remained was something new, something that made corporate executives lose sleep in governments. Classify her as a weapon of mass destruction. The sound of approaching boots grew louder, more coordinated. 8 men, all armed with military-grade weapons, all wearing environmental suits that made them look like walking tanks. All determined to end her life and collect the paycheck that would set them up for retirement. Brooks had trained these men. Well, they moved with professional precision, covering each other's angles, maintaining radio silence to avoid giving away their positions. They were good, the best corporate could buy, but they were still just men, and she was something else entirely. Sarah closed her eyes and embraced the cold that had become her prison, her power, her identity. The ice responded to her call like a faithful dog, spreading from her body in waves. That turned the air itself into frozen sculptures. The facility's metal walls groaned under the sudden temperature change, and she felt the familiar surge of energy that meant her transformation was complete. When she opened her eyes, they glowed with the pale blue light of deep winter, and her breath came out in clouds so cold they formed ice crystals in the methane atmosphere. The corporate soldiers thought they were hunting a monster, but they were wrong. They were hunting something far worse, a woman who'd lost everything and discovered that. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one with nothing left to lose. The first soldier rounded the corner, his plasma rifle raised and ready. Sarah smiled, and the temperature in the tunnel dropped 20 degrees in the span of a heartbeat. "Hello, boys," she whispered, and her voice carried the promise of winter storms and avalanches. "Let's dance." What happens when the hunted becomes the hunter? Sometimes survival isn't about running away, it's about standing your ground and showing the universe exactly what you're made of. Speaking of transformations that seem impossible at first, you won't believe what consistent small actions can accomplish over time. Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding diddle change. How you think about every choice you make. The ice spread faster than Brooks's team could retreat, racing through the tunnels like a living thing hungry for warmth to devour. Sarah watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as the corporate soldiers tried to run, their heavy boots slipping on the suddenly frozen ground, their weapons useless against an enemy that moved at the speed of thought. One by one they fell. Not dead, Sarah had learned to control that much, but frozen in place like insects trapped in amber. Their environmental suits locked up as the ice invaded their systems, their faces visible through their helmets, expressions locked in eternal terror. 8 men who'd come to collect a bounty, now standing as monuments to the folly of hunting something you don't understand. Sarah walked through the frozen tableau like a general inspecting her troops, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent facility. Each statue she passed was a reminder of what she'd become, what she'd been forced to become. The ice followed her like a faithful pet, spreading across the walls and ceiling, transforming the abandoned mining facility into something that looked like the inside of a glacier. "I'm sorry," she whispered to each statue as she passed, her voice carrying genuine remorse that would have surprised her enemies. "I'm so sorry it had to be this way." The first soldier, barely 22, with a picture of his girlfriend tucked inside his helmet. "I'm sorry, kid. You picked the wrong job." Skana, veteran with scars across his face and eyes that had seen too much. "You deserved better than this, soldier." Each apology was a small ritual of grief, a way of holding on to whatever humanity remained inside her transformed shell. Because here's the thing about becoming a monster. The hardest part isn't the transformation itself. It's remembering who you used to be while accepting who you've become. Deep in the facility's core, past corridors lined with frozen mining equipment and abandoned dreams of corporate profit, Sarah found what she'd been searching for: the energy. Signature had been calling to her for weeks, a whisper in the back of her mind that promised answers to questions she'd been afraid to ask. Another artifact sat in a containment field that had failed months ago, twin to the one that had changed her life on Mars. But this one pulsed with warmth instead of cold, radiating heat that made the air shimmer like a desert mirage. Where her artifact had been crystalline blue, this one glowed with the warm amber of a summer sunset. Its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The contrast was stunning. Ice and fire, cold and heat, death, and life decides of the same impossible coin that had scattered across the galaxy long before humanity had learned to make fire. Fascinating, came a voice from behind her, calm and measured in a way that made Sarah's enhanced senses scream danger. Sarah spun around, ice already forming at her fingertips like frozen daggers ready to strike. A woman stood in the shadows of the facility's core, tall and dark-skinned, wearing a thermal suit that marked her as a researcher rather than a soldier. The woman's posture was relaxed, confident, like someone who'd found exactly what they were looking for. Dr. Angela Martinez, the woman introduced herself with the kind of calm that comes from years of studying things that could kill you. As an archaeologist, I've been tracking these artifacts for years, following their energy signatures across half the galaxy.
Oh.
Stay back, Sarah warned. But Martinez stepped closer, with the fearless curiosity of someone who'd spent their career poking at dangerous alien technology. I don't want to hurt you. You know what's really interesting about scientists? They're the only people crazy enough to walk toward something that could freeze them solid and call it research. The artifact that changed you, it wasn't meant to be a weapon, Martinez said, her voice urgent with the kind of excitement that came from breakthrough discoveries. Corporate got it wrong. Like they get everything wrong when they try to weaponize things they don't understand. It was meant to save a dying species. Sarah's hand trembled as she stared at the warm artifact, feeling its heat battle against the cold that had become her constant companion. What are you talking about? These beings, they called themselves the Preserved, Martinez continued, pulling out a tablet that showed star charts and alien symbols. They faced extinction from cosmic radiation when their sun went supernova. They had a choice: die as they were, or evolve to survive in the cold of space. They chose survival. The pieces began falling into place like a puzzle Sarah hadn't known she was solving. The ice powers, the way her body had adapted to survive in environments that should have killed her. The constant pull she felt toward the cold depths of space, it all made horrible, beautiful sense. But they didn't just transform themselves, Martinez said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. They sent out these artifacts as seeds, as invitations. They were looking for other species worthy of preservation. Other civilizations that might need their gift to survive. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. You're saying they chose me? I'm saying they chose humanity, Martinez replied, and her words hit like a physical blow. The Mars expedition wasn't an accident. The artifact was meant to be found, meant to transform someone who could handle the change, someone strong enough to be humanity's ambassador to the cold reaches of space. The warm artifact pulsed brighter, and Sarah felt an answering response from the ice powers flowing through her veins. Two halves of the same whole, fire and ice. Creation and preservation, all part of a plan that had been set in motion long before Earth had cooled from its molten birth. They're still out there, Martinez whispered, and her voice carried the weight of a truth that would change everything. And they're coming to Earth. Sarah reached out toward the warm artifact, her ice-cold fingers inches from its surface. What do they want? To welcome us to the family, Martinez said. Or to judge whether we're worthy of survival. The facilities, emergency systems suddenly activated, alarms blaring as massive energy signatures appeared on the long-range sensors. Through the facility's viewports, Sarah could see lights in the sky, not stars, but ships. Hundreds of them, moving with purpose toward the inner solar system. The Preserved had arrived, and humanity's final exam was about to begin. What happens when first contact isn't about meeting aliens, but about joining them? Sometimes the greatest. Discoveries aren't found in laboratories, they're found in the moments. When everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down, just like how small, consistent actions can create massive changes over time. Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding. You'll never look at growth the same way again. The preserved ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, like falling icicles the size of skyscrapers, their crystalline hulls catching and refracting sunlight into deadly laser beams that carved through clouds and turned rain into frozen shards. Sarah watched from the command center of the Resistance base buried deep in the Colorado Rockies, her breath fogging the reinforced viewport as she witnessed humanity's worst nightmare unfold in real time. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Hundreds of ships that looked like living diamonds, their surfaces shifting and flowing like liquid crystal, each one large enough to carry thousands of the beings she'd come to know as the Preserved. They moved with purpose and grace, descending toward Earth's major population centers with the inevitability of an avalanche. Casualty reports coming in from every major city. Lieutenant David Chen announced from the communications station, his voice cracking with the strain of processing information no human should have to relay. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, they're flash-freezing entire populations. The ice is spreading faster than people can evacuate. Sarah's enhanced vision allowed her to see the tactical displays with perfect clarity, each red dot representing thousands of lives lost in the span of heartbeats. The Preserved weren't destroying cities, they were transforming them, turning bustling metropolises into frozen sculptures of crystalline beauty where human life had once thrived. General Patricia Stone, a woman who'd commanded armies and never had met a problem she couldn't solve with superior firepower, slammed her fist on the tactical display hard enough to crack the reinforced glass. Our weapons are useless against their ships. Plasma cannons just bounce off their ice armor like raindrops. Nuclear missiles detonate against their shields without leaving a scratch. The truth hit the room like a physical blow. Humanity's most advanced military technology, weapons that could glass planets and crack moons, were nothing more than fireworks against beings who'd evolved to survive in the cold depths of space. Every missile, every laser, every desperate attempt at defense was like trying to stop a blizzard with a hairdryer. Sarah stepped forward, her boots crackling with frost that spread across the metal floor like spiderwebs. The temperature in the command center dropped 10 degrees with each step she took, and she watched the military personnel instinctively back away from her. Even now, even as humanity faced extinction, they were still afraid of what she'd become. "Me talk to them," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been transformed by the same power that was currently reshaping Earth. "Are you insane?" Stone snapped, her face flushed with the kind of anger that came from watching your species get systematically erased. "They're slaughtering millions. This is genocide on a scale that makes every war in human history look like a playground fight." But Sarah shook her head, her ice-blue eyes reflecting knowledge that came from months of living with alien technology flowing through her veins. "They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to terraform Earth, to make it suitable for their species and ours combined. But they don't understand. We're not all like them. We're not all capable of surviving the transformation. You know what's really terrifying about alien invasions? It's not the death rays or the giant monsters. It's the possibility that they genuinely think they're helping you." Through the base's speakers came the alien broadcast, cutting through military frequencies and civilian channels alike. Not words the Preserved had evolved beyond such crude communication, but pure emotion and concept transmitted directly into human minds like telepathic hammers. The message hit everyone in the command center simultaneously. Cold-welcome-home-finally-peace-salvation-evolution-complete. Sarah pressed her hand to the communication panel, ice spreading across its surface like frozen lightning as she tapped. Into the same energy that had transformed her on Mars, she pushed her consciousness outward. broadcasting her own message through the crystalline network that connected every preserved ship. Stop-pain-human-not-enemy-coexistence-possible-understanding-needed. The alien response hit her like a physical blow that sent her staggering backward. The communication wasn't just words or concepts, it was raw emotion, backed by the collective will of billions of beings who'd watched their own world die and had spent millennia searching for others to save. Warmth-sickness-must-be-cure-cold-brings-salvation-fire-brings-death-ice-brings-life-eternal. They think they're saving us. Sarah gasped, falling to her knees as the full weight of the Preserved's intentions crashed into her mind. They watched their own sun go supernova. They know what heat and radiation can do to a civilization. To them, warmth is death, and cold is the only path to eternal life. The command center erupted in chaos as more reports flooded in. Paris was now a city of ice sculptures, its citizens frozen in place like living statues. Beijing had become a crystalline wonderland, where the temperature had dropped to -50 degrees in the span of minutes. Every major population center was being systematically transformed into environments where the preserved could thrive. How do we fight beings who think they're doctors performing surgery on a sick planet? Stone demanded, her voice carrying the desperation of someone who'd built her entire career on finding military solutions to impossible problems. Sarah struggled to her feet, ice crystals forming in her hair as her powers surged in response to the alien presence filling Earth's atmosphere. We don't fight them, show them another way. They're operating on the assumption that all biological life follows the same pattern, that evolution always leads to the same endpoint. But humanity is different. We're not just survivors, we're adapters. The viewport suddenly blazed with light as a massive preserved ship descended toward their hidden base, its crystalline hull reflecting the mountain peaks like a mirror made of frozen starlight. The ship was beautiful in the way that avalanches are beautiful, magnificent, unstoppable, and absolutely deadly. "They found us," Chen reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Energy readings are off the charts. They're charging some kind of weapon." Sarah looked out at the approaching ship and felt the alien consciousness pressing against her mind like a glacier trying to break through a dam. They weren't just coming to freeze the base, they were coming to transform everyone inside it, to complete the evolution they believed was humanity's salvation. "Not if I can help it," Sarah said, and her voice carried the promise of winter storms and the fury of someone who'd lost everything and refused to lose anything more. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. Would humanity's warmth be enough to melt the preserved certainty? Or would Earth become just another frozen monument to a civilization that had chosen evolution over extinction? What happens when good intentions collide with desperate survival? Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, they're fought with understanding. Just like how small, consistent actions can build into something unstoppable over time. Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding. You'll discover how tiny changes can create massive transformations. The massive preserved. Mothership hovered over New York like a crystalline cathedral suspended in the sky. Its form so vast it blocked out the sun and cast geometric shadows across the frozen city below. Sarah stood alone on the Empire State Building's observation deck, 800 feet above the streets that had become rivers of ice, the wind whipping her hair as she faced the alien vessel that held the fate of two species in its crystalline heart. The city beneath her was a masterpiece of frozen terror. Central Park had become a glass sculpture where children's laughter had been replaced by the silence of ice. Times Square was a crystalline canyon where the bright lights had been replaced by the cold glow of alien technology. 7 million people had been transformed into living statues, their last moments preserved in perfect detail as the preserved idea of salvation swept across the planet. Inside her mind, she felt the presence of their leader pressing against her consciousness like a glacier trying to break through a dam. Ancient, powerful, and carrying the weight of billions of lives lost to cosmic radiation when their sun had gone supernova eons ago. The being's thoughts were tinged with desperate hope and the kind of certainty that came from watching your entire civilization die. Asterisk, ice-daughter-y-do-u-resist-gift-we-offer. The voice echoed through her mind with the force of winter storms and the patience of geological time. We-have-brought-salvation-to-dying-world-cold-cold-preserves-heat-destroys-you-should-understand, because not everyone wants to be saved. Replied aloud, her voice carrying across the telepathic link with a strength that surprised even her. Some of us choose to burn bright rather than freeze forever. Concept seemed to confuse the alien leader, like trying to explain color too. Someone who'd only ever seen in black and white. To the preserved, survival was the only value that mattered. They'd watched their world die in nuclear fire and had chosen transformation over extinction. Cold over heat, preservation over the messy chaos of biological life. Sarah pulled out the warm artifact Dr. Martinez had given her. Its surface pulsing with energy that made her ice powers recoil like a vampire facing sunlight. The artifact was beautiful in its own way, amber-colored crystal that seemed to contain liquid fire. Its surface covered in symbols that told the story of the preserved's ancient enemies, a species that had chosen fire over ice, extinction over transformation, freedom over safety. You know what's funny about cosmic conflicts? They're never really about good versus evil. They're about two different definitions of what it means to be alive. Asterisk, you, dash, would, dash, choose, dash, death, dash, over, dash, evolution. The alien leader's voice carried genuine confusion and a hint of something that might have been sadness. Asterisk, we dash offer dash eternity dash peace dash freedom dash from dash pain dash why dash do dash reject dash gift dash beyond dash price. Asterisk, I choose freedom, Sarah said, raising the artifact above. Her head like a torch in the darkness. For all of us, the freedom to make mistakes, to feel pain, to live messy, complicated. Beautiful lives that don't last forever but mean everything while they're happening. The warm energy of the artifact clashed with her ice-cold nature, creating a feedback loop that made the air around her shimmer with heat. Sarah felt the power building inside her like a star about to go supernova. Two opposing forces locked in a battle that would determine the fate of every living thing on Earth. The energy spread outward from the Empire State, building like ripples. In a pond, racing across the frozen city at the speed of thought, everywhere it touched, the ice began to crack and melt. The feedback loop was rewriting the very structure of reality. It's changing the fundamental rules that governed matter and energy in this corner of the universe. Every frozen human began to thaw, their cellular structure rewritten to resist the cold while maintaining their essential humanity. Children took their first breaths in hours, their parents' tears of joy freezing and then melting as warmth returned to their bodies. The preserved's gift was being undone, but not destroyed, transformed into something new, something that honored. Both species need to survive. The massive mothership above her began to pulse with different colors, confusion, and understanding, then something that might have been respect. The alien leader's voice filled her mind one final time. But now it carried warmth instead of cold. Asterisk. Fire-daughter-has-chosen-path-different-from-hours-we-honor-choice-perhaps-diversity-brings-strength-we-forgotten. The preserved ships began to withdraw, their crystalline hulls catching the sunlight as they rose through Earth's atmosphere like reverse meteors. They moved with the same grace they'd shown during their arrival, but now their purpose was different. They weren't leaving in defeat, they were leaving in recognition that the universe was large enough for multiple definitions of survival. As the alien fleet disappeared into the void, Sarah collapsed to her knees on the observation deck, her body no longer generating ice. The transformation was complete, but the cost had been everything that had made her special. Her enhanced abilities, her connection to the cold, her purpose as humanity's bridge to the stars, all of it was gone, burned away in the feedback loop. That had saved her species. Dr. Martinez found her there hours later, unconscious but alive, fully human once more. The Zen archaeologist had tears in her eyes as she checked Sarah's vital signs. Finding nothing but normal human readings where once there had been impossible power. "The world's safe," Martina said softly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd witnessed the birth of a new age. "The ice is melting everywhere. The preserved left gifts behind technology that will help us survive climate change, explore space, maybe even reach the stars ourselves someday." Sarah opened her eyes, feeling truly warm for the first time in months. The sensation was strange after so long in the cold, like putting on clothes that had been sitting in front of a fireplace. "Good," she whispered, and her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd found their purpose and fulfilled it completely. Let it burn. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber that reminded Sarah of the warm artifact's glow. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sounds of a city coming back to life, car horns, sirens, the beautiful chaos of humanity refusing to be preserved in perfection. Sarah Mitchell had saved the world by choosing to be human instead of something greater. And in that choice, she discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give up power itself. What happens when the greatest sacrifice isn't giving up your life, but giving up the thing that makes you special? Sometimes true. Heroism isn't about becoming more than human. It's about choosing to remain human when you could be something else entirely. Just like how small, consistent choices can compound into extraordinary transformations over time. Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding. You'll discover how tiny decisions can reshape your entire future.